Hey guys, how y'all doing? Bioniclesaurus here, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the CollectA Pachycephalosaurus from 2013, apparently. I thought it was actually older. It's a pretty good figure though, so I guess it makes sense that it's not too old, since CollectA is a company that comes from a history of making originally very poor figures and then, progressed later, so 2013 seems about right. This is like the most random and least relevant figure I could possibly review. But I'm excited to talk about it kind of because of that, because I would imagine not too many people have really paid any proper attention to this little guy. But this figure is honestly, I really enjoy it. I bought it specifically because I don't have any other Pachycephalosaurs in my collection. I have a few Pachycephalosaurus, toys, Chinosaurs, cheap type stuff, whatever you want to call it, but no proper models or figures. And so this is entering into a new era. And the thing is with Pachycephalosaurs, whether it be Pachycephalosaurus itself or especially with other genre related to it, you really there's not that many to pick from. The selection from any company around now is just not great. So I'm happy that we have at least this, because this is nice, and there are a couple other solid ones, but this was just my favorite one. It was between this or the Papo figure, and the Papo is a little too, hey, I'm from Jurassic Park, remember that? Yeah. So in terms of just the overall look of the thing, it's solid. It's on a base, and I'll just talk about the one major problem with this. The base is warped, and I mean, I bought this in January, so it's not like heat during shipping is causing this. This is just kind of how it is out of the factory, somehow. I'm not saying they're all like this. I'm sure there's some that have completely normal bases, but obviously sometimes the bases get warped. Mine is a pretty bad teeter-totter, and it's a bit annoying because it makes him lean even further forward than he would normally, and that's slightly annoying. At the very least, the base itself is nice. It's better than what CollectA would go on to do with bases later. We actually have some little leaves sculpted in, and they're even kind of painted. They're a slightly more vivid shade of yellowish tan than the base tan of the thing, and there's even some gray in there to represent little rocks under the sand or soil. It's subtle. It could be done a heck of a lot better, but at least there's something going on there. I do find it kind of weird that his feet look a bit submerged, but there's no footprint here. The way he's walking, shouldn't we see at least one track from where he just, I don't know, maybe he just jumped out of a tree. That makes perfect sense. In terms of the paint job of the actual body of the figure, it's somewhat Christmassy. It's fairly dull green and red, but it works nicely. It fades out into kind of a beige or tan on the underside. We do have a cloaca, nice little detail. CollectA usually does cloacas. CollectA, cloacas, it just makes sense. There's nothing overly impressive to comment on with the paint job. It's just solid. The pose is really nice. It's on a base, so it's not the most impressive thing, and it's not the most interesting pose, but it's just a really solid, fluid, natural-looking, just standing posture. Solid. I apologize if you hear a windstorm going on in the background. The reason you might hear that is because there is a windstorm going on in the background, and I'm in the attic floor just below the roof, and there's trees with limbs bent. It's an absolute just natural disaster. But anyway, regarding sculpted detail, it's actually really impressive, I gotta be honest. This figure is very small, in case you couldn't tell, but there's scalation. It's not completely consistent. It kind of fades in and out. It's slightly muddled in places, slightly faint, but there is, notable individual scalation. And it's pretty crisp where it actually is there, kind of. Definitely not perfect, but really nice. In terms of the head detail, the head is pretty darn nice looking considering how tiny it is. Look at it next to my thumbnail. And it's a Pachycephalosaurus. The thing has a complex skull structure to get right. And they mostly did. In terms of the orientation of all the spikes and everything like that, it all looks pretty close to the real thing. And in terms of paint job, I like what they were able to put in here with a little bit of white and the yellow accents. I like that the head fades out to just the red color, completely abandoning the green. It's a nice little shift, makes it just a tad more interesting. But as long as we're talking about the head, we may as well get into anatomy, because Pachycephalosaurus, like I said, complex animal to get right. And they almost got it right, but not quite. In terms of the actual orientation and permutation of all the knobs and spikes on the skull, that's all relatively fine. You might be able to find some small inconsistencies with the fossil material, but it's mostly totally acceptable. The main problem is how long these spikes and knobs are. Now, the thing we know about Pachycephalosaurus is that Dracorex and Stygimoloch, which were previously considered their own genera, are now invalid and actually just junior synonyms of Pachycephalosaurus, meaning they were the younger growth stages of the species, or the genus, the animal, whatever. And they have much longer spikes, much less pronounced domes. So as the animal grew, its spikes sort of got smaller and retracted into just blunt knobs, but the dome on top of the head fused, got harder, and got larger, much more of a potential defensive structure. It may have just been for display, we don't know, I'm not here to talk about that. But the point is that with how long these spikes are, this thing is like, it's making me think that it should be a juvenile, but the dome looks fully developed. There may have been fully formed adults that still had spikes close to this long, but it's just a little bit questionable. We also have these spines running down the back and under the throat, interestingly. We don't know if those were there or not, but they seem perfectly plausible, and I like having spines under the throat. That's a unique artistic choice, and it's not in direct contradiction to how we think the animal was, even though it's not directly supported either. Overall, that's basically everything I have to say. I'm going to go ahead and give this figure, I think, a 9? There's really not much to complain about. It's anatomically really solid, it's well detailed, it's so small, and that just automatically makes everything about it just a tad more, impressive. And it's just a great little figure. It's probably the best Pachycephalosaurus that's widely available in reasonably sized, reasonably well-made figure form. I recommend this one. It's a 9. It's not a 10. 10 is reserved for something extraordinary, but this is a really good figure. Thank you for watching, and Bioniclesaurus signing out. Hold the phone, size comparisons. Here it is, real quick, next to the Pachycephalosaurus, just to give you an idea of how small it is. The Pachycephalosaurus, of course, is our constant for non-hashtag HowISafari reviews. This is obviously not a hashtag HowISafari review. There you go. It's a tiny figure, still a really wonderful figure. All right, now it's time for the outro.